Hey there, listeners. Well, leadership is one of the most influential forces in any organization. When it's done well, it inspires, it lifts, and transforms individuals, teams, and organizations. But when leadership becomes toxic, the damage can be far reaching. In today's episode, we'll look at when is leadership toxic? What is toxic leadership, the impact it has, and then what to do about it. So let's discuss.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos.
Welcome to the Ask Dennis episode. This is a freestyle episode where I'm asked a question by our listeners or share my thoughts, experiences, and insights from working with many leaders around the globe. When leadership is toxic, what an interesting topic to talk about in today's Ask Dennis episode. As I said in my introduction, leadership is one of the most influential forces in any organization. And you know and I know that when it's done well, wow, it really inspires, lifts, and transforms individuals, teams, and organizations. But when leadership becomes toxic, the damage can be far-reaching. Actually, it can impact not just the people that are involved, but also the very fabric of the organization. Now, there's a saying out there that the fish rots from the head. And so what do you do about it? And do you step back and keep quiet and put it under the carpet or the rug and then hope it goes away? You see, in today's episode, listeners, I want to look at what toxic leadership looks like, the harm it causes, and then how we can address it. So what is toxic leadership? Toxic leadership is when behaviors from those in leadership roles, they start to lose trust, diminish morale, and create a very unhealthy work environment. It's the opposite of what leadership should be. You're aware it should be uplifting and empowering. Instead, toxic leaders often focus on their own interests at the expense of the team. And I'm sure that you and I know one or two leaders who may have been like this in your career. In fact, some of you may be experiencing it right now. If you are experiencing it right now, please feel free to reach out to me to discuss how you might be able to approach things and so forth. So feel free to reach out to me on email, dennis@leadingchangepartners.com, or send me a message on social media, a private message, and let's have a chat and let's talk about how you might be able to handle things. So I'm just going to go through things right now because you see some common traits of toxic leaders are what? Well, number one, micromanagement. They are constantly, not just once or twice, constantly looking over your shoulder and controlling, leaving no room for you to have autonomy. Number two is that they blame shifting or shift the blame. They're refusing to own the mistakes. Instead, what they tend to do is they point fingers at others. Number three, there's poor communication. So what they tend to do is they tend to withhold vital information or they start spreading confusion. Number four is favoritism. Now listen to this one. They treat certain individuals with special treatment, and that starts to cause division. Number five is manipulation. They use fear, guilt, or they coerce people to get their own way. Maybe we might call that being a bully or bullying. Number six is the lack of empathy. They ignore the emotional needs and well-being of their team. So the impact of toxic leadership is what? Well, the effects of toxic leadership are significant and often long-lasting. They have this ripple through the teams and organization kind of effect, and it leaves a bit of a trail behind them, a trail of harm. Now, when I talk about the ripple effect, what do I mean by that? So if you think about a pond, a lake, the water is flat as anything, very, very smooth. And you throw a stone, a pebble into that lake, into that pond, you then see the ripple effect of everything going out as well. That's the same thing that a lot of toxic leadership does. So here are some important or some common impacts that people may be experiencing, but these are some common impacts of a toxic leadership. Here we go. Low morale. So people, they start to feel like they're undervalued, unappreciated, unheard, and disengaged. There tends to be a high turnover, large numbers of attrition. Talented individuals walk out the door as well. And what are they doing? They're taking the IP, the right attitudes, and the skills, and it all leaves with them. The next one is that there's decreased productivity. There could be things like fear and confusion that leads people to make mistakes, or there's an inefficiency. People don't go out of their way or try and be creative to get things done. The next one is reputation damage. Toxic environments get talked about. No, it sort of makes it harder to attract top talent and clients. Why? Because people start to talk and they share with others about the bad experiences and the toxic leadership in the organization. Mental health issues is another common impact. Team members may experience burnout, anxiety, or even depression. If you are experiencing any of those, once again, please feel free to reach out to me to talk. Now, you might be thinking, so why does toxic leadership persist? Why does it hang around? Why does it keep going? And often it tends to go unchecked because it delivers short-term results. Now, what do I mean by that? They got the project over the line, they met their numbers, but the question I've got is at what expense did they do it? I'm not talking about dollars. I'm talking about how many people did they run over? How many people were they so bad with that, they've left or people are now damaged? You see, fear-driven tactics might force people to be compliant, or it might actually force people to have a performance spike, which is good, but it's really unsustainable. So organizations may also allow toxic leadership to persist because of the following: a focus on results over relationships, just before, like I was saying before. They might have some weak accountability systems. There could be the fear of confronting the toxic leader. A culture that normalizes or says that it's okay or condones poor behavior. The number of times I've watched organizations allow something to fester and go on and on. Some leaders, by the time I get to work with them, I get to meet them and we talk about things, it could be 12 months, 18 months that this scenario has been happening. Why do they let it happen so long? Sometimes it's just about a matter of having a conversation that's going to feel uncomfortable and a decision needs to be made. But no, they don't want to do that, hoping that it might go away. And guess what? It doesn't. In fact, it starts to become a bigger issue. So what are some steps to address toxic leadership? Transforming a toxic leadership culture starts with, first of all, awareness and then action. If you're not aware of it and you're not acknowledging it, then you can't do anything about it first, or you don't even know it's there. So here are some practical steps to think about. Now, there's just a few, and I know there's probably more, but in the time I've got with you, I'm just going to go through some right now. Number one would be regular feedback. Put some processes or systems where team members can provide honest, anonymous feedback about the leadership behaviors. Now, some organizations do pulse surveys. That could be okay, but what I find sometimes is that leaders do nothing about the feedback, which is not okay. Number two is clarify the values. Establish and live by the core organizational values that prioritize things like respect, collaboration, and integrity. Number three, is invest in leadership development. So train leaders to lead with empathy, communicate effectively, and resolve conflicts quickly and constructively. Number 4 is enforce accountability. So hold leaders to the same high standards you expect from your team. Number 5 is open the dialogue. So foster an environment where concerns can be raised without the fear of retaliation. See, maybe some people are very scared about saying things because there could be something that happens further on down the track because they did say something and they did bring something to someone's attention. Transforming toxic leadership. You see, toxic leaders don't have to stay toxic forever. Change is possible, but it requires what I call deliberate or intentional effort. And I would even say focus. So how can it happen? Well, first of all, it's got to be self-reflection. Leaders, they must take a hard look at their behavior and its impacts on others. In other words, go and look in the mirror. Ask their leaders to look in the mirror. Maybe you need to have the discussion with them to bring up to them and help them understand and have an awareness of what they do and the impact that it's actually having on others. The next area would be around guidance and mentorship. So one way you could do this here is you could pair those leaders who are struggling, pair them up with a mentor who really is demonstrating and living positive leadership traits and get them to lift the other person up. The third area would be around prioritizing well-being. So encourage leaders to take care of their physical and mental health so then they can lead from a place of strength and clarity. I talk about in my programs about being match fit. It's not just about being physically fit, but it's also about being mentally fit. For you as a leader to be able to take things on and work through things on a daily basis with all sorts of things happening, you've got to be in a place of strength and clarity. And that only comes from being physically and mentally fit. There is an antidote to toxic leadership, and that is changing a toxic culture really requires courageous leadership at every level of the organization. So it's not just one area, it's got to be at every level. It's about stepping up to address difficult issues, holding really strong to the values, and then putting people first. When leaders lead with courage and integrity, they create that ripple effect that inspires others to do the same. So if you're seeing things not being done well, you're seeing things being toxic, make sure that you are okay, that your backyard is okay, and that you're showing things really strongly as a leader in a positive way. Show the others, take them on the journey as well. When leadership is toxic, the cost is immense. As I said before, it's immense to individuals, teams, and organizations. But it doesn't have to stay that way. By recognizing the signs that I talked about before, addressing the behaviors, and fostering a culture of accountability and empathy, we can transform toxic leadership into a way that is going to be like a force of goodness, a force of leadership that's going to inspire and lift and transform people to new levels. Let's make sure that as leaders, that's what gets done and that's what their focus is. Leadership should uplift and inspire. Hey listeners, well, your call to action, there's 2 of them this week. Check out my new website that we've launched, leadingchangepartners.com. Check it out. Check out the testimonials on it. Check out the abouts, but also the different sort of services I have, speaking, workshops, and coaching as well. You'll notice that there's a tab there for resources, and they are some blogs, and in fact the latest one's about to be released, and so there should be about 6, maybe 7 there now, blogs for you to read as well, and some really good information about leadership. Number 2 call to action is for you to download the executive guide. Now, it's called the 10 Proven Ways to Lead and Thrive in Today's World. This has come about by me interviewing nearly 300 leaders around the world on this podcast. Major themes, about 30 of them are coming through. We've taken 10 of them and put 42 strategic insights underneath all the 10, and it's a great PDF guide. It's not very big for you to read through, but it's powerful. It's impactful. So download it. The link for it is in the show notes below this episode. If you scroll down, the production team have gone and put that link in there for you, so then you can click on it and download the guide. Hey listeners, that's it for this episode. It's always a pleasure being with you. Thanks for joining me on the Leadership is Changing podcast. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Denis Gianoutsos. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.